And welcome to this meeting of the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel. I declare the meeting open at 9:31 a.m. and I acknowledge we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respect to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters, and community. This meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the DAP Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the DAP regulations. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist in considering the information before them. I'd like to introduce our members that will be participating in this meeting today. My name is Dale Page. I'm the presiding member today. To my left, I have Clayton Hyam, Deputy Presiding Member, Luigi D'Alessandro, Specialist Member. Online, we have Councillor Peter Melrosa from the town of Victoria Park, and with us in the room, we have Councillor Daniel Minson from Victoria Park. For the later items on our agenda, we have Mayor Robert Rossi from the City of Belmont and Councillor Phil Marks from the City of Belmont, and even later on, Councillor Ingrid Van Dawson for the City of Fremantle and Councillor Andrew Sullivan, City of Fremantle. Item 2, apologies, there are nil. Item 3, noting of minutes. Minutes of all previous meetings are available on our DAP website. Moving on now to part B of our agenda, which deals with the town of Victoria Park. Item 1 is declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within part B of the agenda and the part B related information. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have duly considered all information? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Disclosures of interest. Could I check with our local government members whether this application for Vic Park has been before you at a briefing or a meeting? No, great. I haven't received any other disclosures to this point. Do any members wish to make any other declarations of interest in relation to? No? All right, moving on then. Item 3, Form 1 DAP applications. We don't have any for Vic Park today, but we do have a Form 2 DAP application. Item 4.1, number 2, Lot 100 Hawthorne Place, Erswood. It's a mixed-use development comprising multiple dwellings and offices, and the proposal is for amendments to this approved mixed-use development, DAP number 22/02237. We have one presenter on this item today, Matthew Kane from Planning Solutions, speaking in support of the proposal. I think Matthew knows the drill by now, but in case there's anyone watching online, Matthew has 3 minutes to do his presentation in accordance with our standing orders. We've read all the written information that has been provided, so Matthew will be encouraged to focus on the key points you'd like to get across in the designated 3-minute time frame. Afterwards, panel members will be able to ask any questions. Your presentation starts when you're ready.
Presiding member, good morning. Matthew Kane from Planning Solutions representing SKS. You have before you today an application to amend the original approval, proposing both modifications to design and substantial commencement timeframe. As per the RA and our application materials, whilst our client has undertaken significant and considerable work to date since the original approval, in its current form and with current housing and construction market conditions, the project is not viable to proceed. The amendments that are proposed by this application have been carefully considered to address not only project and construction feasibility matters, but local authority planning advice, as well as design review panel advice. As part of the application, the town's DRP has reviewed the amended design several times and acknowledges it is a good response to not only the principles of SPP 7, but in many respects a better design than originally proposed approval, and that it will likely set a new benchmark for this form of development in the locality. The RA confirms the proposed amendments do not substantially alter or amend the approved development and that it's consistent with the town's framework. Very pleased to receive the officer recommendation for conditional approval, and I take this opportunity just to thank both Joshua Loveridge and Robert Cruikshank from the town for their collaboration in the assessment process to date. We're very supportive of the recommendation as put. We have agreed to some very minor modifications as part of the RAR process, and request that we adopt the recommendation as proposed. Thank you. My client is online. If there are any questions, I know there's numerous other matters probably of greater consideration today, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of this presenter? I'll start with our online member, Councillor. Any questions of the applicant?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Our councillor in the room, any questions again? Go ahead.
Yep. Thank you. So I guess my questions are around the increase in the number of dwellings from the original proposal to the amended one. I guess therefore the kind of the reduction in the sizing of all the dwellings. So I guess the context, I'm mostly kind of looking at the table provided by yourself in response to some of the town's questions. I think it was at 14. Applicant's response to further information requests. There's a table right at the bottom there that compares, I guess, the dwelling sizes of all the different types of apartments. The 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and then compares it to, I guess, the minimum sizing in the volume 2 of the R codes. And I guess just noting that quite a significant portion, I think it's about 139 out of the 170 proposed dwellings don't meet the minimum requirements of the R code. So I guess looking for comment on that change from the original proposal. I think all the dwellings meet the minimum requirements to the proposed amended DA, where a significant portion don't meet. Just commentary around that change. Is that possible?
Yeah, I'm not sure through the DAP secretary if our client is online at the moment, but I'm happy to answer the question, Councillor. So look, we did go through quite an extensive process before even lodging the application. The client has worked very hard, not only with us, the architects, but also marketing, retail consultants around apartment products. There is a fine balance these days with all these types of projects where we have to get sizing, layout, functionality, provision of amenity, all of those things right. We've gone through quite an extensive process, you can see with the comparison table that was provided. And I think the difference where you're talking about units, we're generally around a square metre, 2 square metres based on what's in the R codes. And the town's officers have determined that based on the element objectives overall in the R codes, that those variations are acceptable. The DRP as well discussed the functionality and amenity of those units and had no concern with how they're laid out. So we're confident that whilst there is some minor discretion, ultimately they're acceptable in the design product that's provided.
So I guess just follow up. So really the driver is, I guess, financial feasibility. Is it for the reduction in sizes of all the dwellings? That's kind of the principle.
Well, across the board to get the project out of the ground, it's around getting the feasibility of the project right, both with yield, product, parking provision, amenity that's provided to a client. They all factor into a development, and we see how that sits within the framework. But obviously there are numerous apartments as well that meet or exceed the requirements as set out.
Questions? Questions from any other panel members?
No, thank you.
No. Okay, thank you, Matthew. We may come back to you, but at this point, nothing else. We are fortunate to have Joshua Loveridge and Robert Cruikshank in the room with us today from the town of Vic Park. Are there any questions any member would like to ask the local government officers? Councillor Melrose, any questions of the officers?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Minson?
Thank you. Yeah. On a similar kind of issue. So I guess noting that in that attachment, there was a response, I guess, to the town's request, and I think it was mostly acknowledging that it was hard to tell what the sizes of the dwellings were, and there was a request for, I guess, further information, and that was the analysis provided. But yeah, I guess looking for a comment around that element 4.3 of the R codes and I guess justification for, I guess, yeah, discretion that's required.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as Matt was saying, the town has done its assessment and has found that it is acceptable from a performance criteria perspective, noting that the extended shortfalls, generally speaking, for 1 or 2 bedroom dwellings are more so in the minor regard, and the internal configurations and ability for furniture and general livability and ventilation have been improved through the further information request, providing that further information. So from a town perspective, we don't have any issues in terms of the ability for livability to be achieved for these dwellings, especially the smaller dwellings where the impact might be more pronounced. For the larger dwellings, there are larger shortfalls, some up to about 12.5 square metres from that sort of original calculation. However, in a similar vein, we're satisfied from a review that it does meet that livability perspective. Yeah, ultimately, a lot of these issues raised, in the further information request and sort of teasing out the methodology for calculation and spending a lot of time and interrogation into its performance ability, performance criteria. Yeah. Are there further? Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so the design review as well, design review panel came back and didn't have any great concerns with respect to livability, providing, some positive feedback with respect to its ability to be a well-functioning space, having a bit of a review against some of the other discretionary elements and, planning frameworks as well, like the student accommodation sort of draft guidelines, having a bit of a review from that and finding that it, generally speaking, does have an acceptable outcome when reviewed on balance against those different considerations.
Follow-up question. Thank you. So I guess understanding that if this type of proposal is to come forward, the discretion can be applied and reviewed by the DRP, and we're looking at all those kind of specific things. We're happy to kind of reduce below the minimum requirements of the R code. I guess there's that, and there's also, I guess, the assessment whether or not this Form 2 application is a substantial change from the original DA. And just taking an example, one of the apartment changes, we've gone from, for a 1-bedroom apartment, the type A, the requirement's 47 square metres. What's proposed now is 45 square metres, so only it's a little bit lower, acknowledging what you've said. But the original proposal were for 61 square metre apartments, so it's actually a 26% reduction in size for that type of apartment. And that's the most common, I think, type. They're those 1-bedroom types, or one of the most common. So I guess is there a separate analysis done based on, I guess, how the new application performs to the R codes as compared to whether that's a substantial reduction from the original proposal?
Yeah, so as part of our assessment, we did review it against what was originally approved, and noting that there are different typologies as well and different configurations. And so we did do that assessment and comparison in that way. We also did do an assessment against the acceptable outcomes as well, which obviously provides a table which outlines what's considered acceptable benchmark for single bedroom dwellings, 2-bedroom dwellings and the like. Our assessment in terms of, I guess, suitability in terms of that was done against that table in terms of whilst there were some minor shortfalls, considering on balance that it was an acceptable outcome when compared against the performance criteria. And obviously it is a more substantial shortfall when compared to the original proposal, but we can, the town considered that was an acceptable outcome, acceptable compromise in that way there.
Thank you. Just to follow up to Councillor Minson's question and the answer you gave, this obviously is a very complex proposal, or detailed proposal, and your report is very detailed. So although there are quite substantial changes to the proposal, could you comment on whether you feel your level of assessment and reporting would have been that different if it was a Form 1?
Ultimately, I think if it were to be a Form 1, we would still come to a similar outcome in that way there. Obviously, there's an existing context of the existing approval, and considering it against, against that context there. Ultimately, the level of assessment that we had undertaken, was quite detailed, quite thorough, and quite rigorous. And so I believe if it were to be a Form 1, we would come to a similar outcome in that case.
So just on that, and it's a question that I have, it's a comment you've made in your reports, rather for my own curiosity for next time. You've stated that you consider this Form 2 a complex or significant application under LPP 37, and therefore you consulted on it. So the Form 2 itself, do you consider that a complex or significant application, or is it because it's linked to the original complex or significant application that you chose to re-advertise? I have no problem with you re-advertising, clear, but is that why you use those words?
Yeah, so generally when it comes to our advertising consultation policy, be defined, complex applications would be, generally speaking, more, substantial amendments or just DAP applications, generally speaking, and we would consider give that sort of more thorough consultation, bandwidth, given that it is obviously a more substantial proposal in its overall sense as well.
Thank you. Councillor Minson, any other questions?
Just a follow-up on that type of thinking. So I guess in reviewing the Responsible Authority report, so there obviously was the request to, can we get some more detail on this minimum internal area? It's not clear from the plans, and then provided. I guess the analysis you're talking about having done isn't I guess presented in that kind of detail you've just presented now in the report. So was that assessment, I guess, documented about having a look at, I guess, the minimum requirements of the R code? And I think there's a reference to an R code's assessment, but it's not presented. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And so the town, as part of the assessment, did a very thorough Form 2, R codes Volume 2 assessment against the R codes. We do have in front of us at this juncture here, where it does go into the different typologies and the different dwellings, and also picking out certain random examples of different dwellings throughout the site, throughout all the different levels, and comparing them overall to see what their site area is, what their internal floor area is, and seeing what level of discretion there is in that way. Ultimately, the town came to the conclusion that it is overall, generally speaking, on an individual apartment basis and an individual building basis, more of a minor extent of discretion being exercised there. And so it was not necessarily considered to be something that was necessarily needed to be put into the Responsible Authority report text itself. However, the town did do a very thorough assessment with any shortfalls of the site area for the dwellings.
Any other member have questions for the City Office?
No, thank you.
Town's officers? No? All right, thank you both for participating today. With that, I think we will move to the report, and we have a recommendation for approval in the report before us. I will now seek a mover and second for that recommendation. Does anyone wish to move that recommendation? I will. I'll move it. Seconded. Hi, thank you. Okay, and talking to the substantive motion, I think, although there are quite a few amendments to discuss that, to the proposal that was previously approved, and some of the amendments are quite significant. I am satisfied that in the context and the scale and complexity of the original development that was approved, the amendments are such that they do fall within a Form 2 application. I'm happy to support the amendments. They don't significantly alter the external presentation or quality of the approved development, and the overall built form and bulk and scale is largely the same as before. There is a minor variation to the permitted height of the podium, noting that the number of stories on the lane frontage has been reduced and is now compliant with the development standards for the Causeway Precinct, the minor increase in height has negligible impact on neighbours or the public realm. The height of the tower has increased slightly in metres to accommodate a lift overrun, but again, the height both in metres and in stories is still compliant with the relevant development standards. There's been a minor reduction in the setback of the tower to the laneway, but this applies to portions or bits of the build form only and not the whole facade. And the reduced impact or the reduced setback has no impact on the neighbours or the public realm. In fact, because of the rotation of this building facade, even with the reduced setback, there is less appearance, in my view, of building bulk than there would have been. I'm happy to see the increase in the number of units, much needed residential accommodation in our cities, and the diversity of accommodation proposed. I'm also happy to see an increase in the number of trees that are proposed to be planted and in the amount of deep soil area proposed. I note there were 2 objections received to the amendments through the public consultation process, and these primarily related to parking provisions, but there is quite a significant parking surplus for residents, and the amount of visitor bays has been increased. Although the parking bays for the offices have been removed or repurposed, this does align with the development standards for the Causeway Precinct. And I also note that the amount of bike parking has increased significantly and there's now surplus of those facilities. I'm happy that the amendments were put back through the design review process on 2 occasions and underwent a final review by the chair, who is now satisfied that the bulk of outstanding issues to be resolved have either been addressed through design changes or will be addressed through the conditions of approval that the town has recommended. So I'm also satisfied because sometimes with these Form 2 we find new conditions popping up that are a second bite of the cherry, but I'm pleased to see that the new conditions and the amendments to conditions that are contained in the advice notes that are contained in the report do appropriately relate to or arise from the design changes that have been made. So I'm happy to support those. With that, I will hand to the seconder.
Thank you. Look, I agree. I am totally satisfied that this is a Form 2 application under the regulations, although on the surface it would appear that the changes are quite substantial. But I think for any normal assessment of a Form 2, though some of those changes can be quite extensive, even though it's still considered to be a minor change to the original approval. Also note that it's been through the design review panel on a couple of meetings, and there's been some modifications as a result of that, and the remaining issues can be dealt with through conditions. In terms of discretion, the height, in my view, is a minor variation for both the tower and the podium, but both are acceptable in terms of any impact, noting that the lane frontage is now compliant according to the RAR. Also note the changes in sizes to unit, the unit sizes themselves, but accept the officer's comments that they are now, or in fact the DRP, they're still functional units. In terms of setbacks, they're relatively minor and not likely to impact visual amenity, and the landscaping is largely compliant, although there is a need to address the deep soil issue. In terms of time extension, I note the arguments presented by the officers for an extension. They are reasonable and in my view supportable. The RAR presents a very comprehensive evaluation against the various legislative requirements, including the state planning policy 7.0, or 67 and LPP 33, guidance to concessions. So I congratulate the officers on a very, very well written and comprehensive report. Happy to support the proposal with conditions.
Thank you, Member Hyam. Does any other member wish to speak for or against the recommendation?
Yeah, I'll be speaking against the recommendation. And fundamentally, it's about, I guess, it being a Form 2 application, and I guess trying
trying to meet the regulation requirement that the amendments that, don't substantially change the development as approved. So in my assessment, the new application, on the outside, the tower height, the bulk is slightly reduced. The setbacks are similar. On the outside, the development, much the same, and the changes aren't significant. But really, I guess if you're giving that to in your justification that there's not a change, I guess when the dwellings increase from 119 to 170 in this application, that's a 43% increase in the number of dwellings. To me, that's quite a substantial increase. And if you're saying that the height and the bulk is similar, obviously there's therefore a significant reduction in the sizes of these dwellings. So for me, the changes are quite significant. From the original, we were talking 119 dwellings that all met the R code minimum requirements. They weren't massive apartments, but they were all quite sizable, livable, had good amenity, you could fit your furniture in there. They all met also not just the total minimum habitable size, it's also, I think there's requirements around, say, the master bedroom sizing in the R codes, which is, I think, a minimum 10 square metre type size for a master bedroom, which is still quite small, but pretty much every single apartment in this dwelling is all 9 square metres, so pretty much none of the master bedrooms meet the minimum requirements now of the R codes. So we've gone from, I guess, 0% of the dwellings not meeting the minimum sizing for the R codes to now 82%. So a massive kind of proportion of these dwellings don't meet now the minimum R codes for sizing, and acknowledging that we can say, oh, there's discretion and it can be made livable with technical changes. Really, that type of change is very substantial for someone living in those apartments. That they're gonna think there's a substantial difference between living in I think on the type 1 bedroom apartment, the one bedroom apartment, a 61 square metre apartment down to a 45 square metre apartment. I think they're gonna feel a substantial change. So I guess in conclusion, I'd also like to address, I guess, the talking about needing to deliver affordable and a mixed use and different types of sizing apartments. And I agree. Obviously, we need to increase the supply of housing in the state and in the city. But I don't think, I can't personally do it in good conscience by not meeting the minimum standards. I don't see that as the solution to delivering more housing. Is delivering substandard apartments, small apartments. It's not the way I would address that issue. So I guess in conclusion that I don't consider the significant increase to the number of dwellings and therefore the commiserate kind of substantial reduction in size and layout of the individual dwellings to be minor. I think it's quite substantial, and therefore I can't conclude that the application satisfies regulation 17(1)(c) of the planning development regulations, being that this would not be a substantial change to the development as it originally approved. Thank you.
Councillor. Anyone else wish to speak for or against the recommendation?
I'd like to speak for the recommendation. I'm satisfied with the officer's recommendation and explanation that it is a Form 2. It's been a very thorough assessment, in my view. The proposal still, in my view, is of a high quality, consistent with the aims and objectives of the schemes. I'm satisfied with the reduction in floor areas as per the DRP, the design review panel. The functionality and the spaces are probably better designed, smaller use. So on that basis, I will be voting for it.
Councillor Melrose?
Yeah, I'm happy to support this application. I'm also satisfied in the Form 2 assessment. What I think is perhaps the most important thing here is that this is really just an extension and there isn't really any particular, I guess, what's the word I'm trying to say? I guess this building may not get built. And I think the community and the town really want to see development in this area. I think we've been waiting around for quite a few DAPs that have gone through in this precinct and nothing's really eventuated from them. I would like to see that some of these changes have actually made this building and development feasible. And I guess within the next 2 years, we'll figure out whether those changes have made this feasible. I think some of the variations are an acceptable form of a development. They're available for developers to vary, I guess. I don't see that these particular variations to be problematic in terms of what's being constructed or what will hopefully be constructed. We have to remember we are in a housing crisis, and a couple of meters here and there in the size of a dwelling is really not going to make the sky fall in. So, I mean, on that basis, I don't really want to wax on about it, but I think the standard of this development looks fantastic. I've spent a bit of time looking at the renders and the plans to try and imagine it in its context. And I think this would be quite a landmark for the Burswood precinct, and the town has a desire, obviously, to kickstart this precinct, and we're going to be spending some money in the future to do streetscape upgrades. We were only sitting in this room a couple of weeks ago for another DAP for this precinct. So it'd be really nice to see this building kickstart that kind of energy in the precinct with people living there. It's kind of waiting to kick off. So these are the kind of buildings that are going to get that to happen. And I think it's the way forward for that precinct. So happy to support it. Thank
you, Councillor. I will make a couple of short comments in closing just to address some of the comments that have been made. The Form 1 versus the Form 2 is an interesting conversation. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the changes are quite substantial. If we had received a report for this Form 2 that was very basic and had just glossed over the changes, I'd have a concern about that. But I think the way, and hence my question earlier, I think the way this has been assessed, consulted on and reported probably wouldn't have been much different if it was a Form 1. So understanding the merit of the changes, I'm pretty comfortable that there is enough there to give us comfort to approve it, whether it was a Form 1 or a Form 2. Just in terms of the size of the dwellings, I acknowledge the comments that have been made. I'm pleased to see that they are affordable, they will be more affordable relatively than others. And I don't share the view that 45 square meters is substandard. It may not meet the base standards, but it has been demonstrated through the report to meet the performance standards. And just anecdotally, I witnessed firsthand a little while ago a queue of people lining up to rent a 45 square meter apartment, and there were families in that queue. So it is small, but it is still livable, and it's about the design and whether or not there's adequate light and whether or not it is functional. I think a 45 square meter apartment is small, but it caters to a sector of the community and it can still be very livable. So I'm happy to support those changes. With that, I will now move to a vote on this item. I'd like to put the recommendation to the vote by a show of hands. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Minson voting against. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 5, section 31, SAT reconsiderations. There are none for a park today. With that, I would like to thank Councillor Melrosa and Councillor Minson, our local government DAP members for the town of Vic Park, as well as our town of Vic Park staff for your assistance and participation today. And thank you for coming in and making your deputation, Matthew. We'll pause for a couple of minutes while we switch to the City of Belmont. Good to go. All right. Moving on now to part C of our agenda, which relates to the City of Belmont. And with that, I'd like to welcome Mayor Robert Rossi and Councillor Phil Marks, our local government DAP members for the City of Belmont, to the panel. Do we have them on screen? We're just getting them up on screen. Right there. Here we go. Item 1 on the agenda is declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within Part C of the agenda and the Part C related information. Could I please confirm by a show of hands that members have considered all information? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 2, disclosures of interest. Could I check with our local government members whether this application went before you at a council briefing or a council meeting? No? Excellent. No other disclosures of interest have been received to this point. Do any members wish to make any declarations of interest in relation to this item? No? Okay. Moving on then to item 3 on the agenda, Form 1 DAP applications. Item 3.1, lot 888, number 2, Hawksburn Road, Rivervale, proposed 108 multiple dwellings, DAP number 25/02942. We have one presenter on this item today, supported by the rest of the applicant team, Peter Simpson from PTS Planning, speaking in support of the proposal. We have also, just for the record, received written submissions from Bruno Brandao Bernardo Isuza and Simon Bazaka. Peter, I remind you, you know the drill, but I remind you in accordance with clause 482 of our standing orders, you have 3 minutes for your presentation. We've read your written documentation, so I'd like you to stick to the key points you'd like to get across within that 3-minute timeframe, and I'll be able to ask you questions after your presentation starts when you're ready.
Thank you. With me, I have Scott Cameron from Gunbar and Sin Chang and Chris Tuckey from Chang Architects, who'll be able to answer any questions from a development. We support the recommendation to approve this application. You'll see by the diversity of product being 33 studio, 161 bedroom and 52 bedroom. This is really targeted at the affordable end of the market. There's been a lot of discussion about the proposed density and scale, and I'm not going to repeat it all because it's very well articulated in the RAR, but critically for this is it's responding to what's existing. There's lots of existing built form that's been particularly established along Great Eastern Highway in terms of density built form, and we're responding to that. One of the other key items that came out of the design is the pedestrian access way, and it's obviously not a requirement, but it's been included, and what it does is it links 2 areas of public open space. So it's quite actually an important access point because it sort of expands the ability for the residents to access through the site other public open space, and that pedestrian access way will include public art, landscaping, and we think it's a very positive outcome for the site. This is a development that's generally supported by the City of Belmont. Well, it is supported by the City of Belmont, a design review panel, and generally by the community. We note there's certain objections, but obviously the advertising went far and wide in what is a high density area. We're mostly comfortable with the proposed conditions. However, we'd like to raise a few of them for your consideration. Condition 1, it's really up to you guys whether you want to change it. It doesn't really matter to us. Condition 5, we're requesting that subclause A be deleted, which required the planter box. I've provided some reasons in our submissions, but in summary, realistically, there's no substantial landscaping on the southern side at podium level. It's all generally maintained and irrigated on the northern portion, which is appropriate. The pickleball court has a glazed balustrade to Great Eastern Highway, and therefore there's going to be interaction between those people on the court and Great Eastern Highway. We think including a landscape strip, screen, planters along there has the potential to reduce that interaction. And as I said, this is really proposed at an affordable outcome. I think the additional requirements and cost and ongoing maintenance doesn't justify its requirement. So we're asking for that to be deleted. Condition 20, we're just seeking to amend this one. It's just really to clarify that it includes both the communal and visitor bays. The residential bays, parking bays for the residents are actually located in individual storerooms, and they're larger than normal storerooms. Condition 26, this is really just a matter of clarification. We brought this up, I think, last time when we had an application here. We just want to ensure that it's on the table that the AC condensers are on the balcony, but they're screened, and we just want to make sure that everybody's aware that that's going to be the case and there's no issues going into.
You're at your 3 minutes, Peter, so I'll ask you to conclude
Can I just deal with the last 2 conditions?
very quickly.
So condition 28 is really just a change of wording, employees, residents, and condition 36, we just think it's better as advice note. So we're seeking approval for the development. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I would like to start with our members online. Mayor Rossi, do you have any questions for the presenters or the applicant team?
No.
Councillor Marks, any questions? Questions from panel members in the room?
Yes. But I think the waste management plan or document, and I'm sure the RAR suggests that the bins will be placed on the verge. I'm not sure where.
No. Do you want to answer that?
No, I don't believe so. We have internal servicing for the waste bins for the general waste and recycling. It's only the bulk bin that will be put out on the bulk bin storage towards the crossover area due to the limited space. So that happens once a year.
So where will the bulk bin be placed?
So just as we enter the site, because we got such a narrow throat.
There's a hard stand just next to the crossover.
Referred to as bulk bin sit-down zone.
Yeah, we can't put bins on the verge because we don't have enough verge.
Oh, no, that's what. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Just from me. So you've raised an issue with a number of conditions, and condition 20, which deals with the communal and visitor bicycle bays. There's no harm or risk with that condition, is there? It's just, you're just clarifying if the condition stated wouldn't be to your detriment in any way, would it?
No, it was really just saying, I think let's bring it up. So it says a minimum of 40 bike bays are to be installed for the purpose of development. It's really just a clarification that those 40 bays are the communal bays and visitor bays as opposed to.
It's just a tidy up, really. Okay.
So yeah, as long as everybody's understanding, which we are, and I suppose he would be, then we don't see a need to amend it.
Okay. Thank you. I don't think there are any more questions. We may come back to you if we need to, but at this point there are no other questions. We will move now to invite questions of the local government officers, and we have Nick Reddy and Brandon Payne with us from the City of Belmont. Are there any questions for these officers? Mayor Rossi.
Yes, please. In the report, it talks about public open space and it's linked to the height. Could I just get a description of Leslie D Park? Because really it's a sliver of grass. So I'm just wondering, why would that be used as part of this development? And really it's so small with a tunnel under it. Can I get some clarification? Am I right in describing it as a very small little, not even a pocket park, it's extremely small? I was wondering how those officers would see it.
Yes, through the chair. So Leslie Deagle Park, I believe, is about the width of Hawksburn Road. It's between 2 Hawksburn and on the other side 3 Hawksburn. Yeah, you're right. It does contain a link, a pedestrian link that goes through the tunnel underneath Great Eastern Highway, and there's grass, trees, and pedestrian walk paths in that area.
It's very small. Next question through the chair. We talk about the visitor bays, and there's a report talks about bicycles provided. Why would they be linked up? They're 2 separate things.
Sorry, Mayor Ross, could you just repeat that question again? Thank you.
You talk about the number of bicycles provided on site, and then you say that we've got a shortfall of visitor bays, but we've got bicycles for people to use. So I'm just trying to see a link why they would be linked up.
Yes, through the chair. So there's a parking shortfall for the visitor bays. However, there's a surplus over parking bays. The city, as part of their assessment, has looked at other forms of public transport, such as the bus stops and other forms of transport, such as bicycles. In this case, they're providing both visitor parking bays for bikes and a strata share bike system. These are modes that potentially could people might choose to use rather than driving and using car parking on site.
Through the chair, I love the idea of shared bicycles. It's the future, but these are visitor bays. Don't you have to first drive there with a car to jump on a bike? Can you see why I can't see the correlation? Because you have to actually jump in a car to go and drive there. I don't understand why we would use that to not provide, because there's clearly a shortfall, which I'll talk in my speech, but how can you link the two up? You have to drive there first to get on a bike. Is that a fair assessment?
Through the chair, so a resident that's staying on site, they may have a car, they may not. Essentially, the strata share bikes that are available could be used by residents. It's not necessarily the case that they'll always have a car on site.
Okay, I was talking about visitor bay, but okay. Local planning, next question for the chair. Local planning policy number 20. Has it been finally adopted?
The chair, the local planning policy number 20 is still in draft form. However, it was previously endorsed by council for advertising, and basically in that aspect, we consider it as a seriously entertained document. But more importantly, local planning policy number 20 simply aligns with the Great Eastern Highway Corridor Strategy, which we've used on multiple occasions for various DAP applications along Great Eastern Highway. So on that aspect, it really, I suppose, the policy really just reaffirms the strategic document's vision.
And last question for the chair, thank you for your patience. The bins allocation, which was already mentioned, I've got that written down too. That's a very small little area on that little road, which is already at breaking point at times, depending on when you could visit there. Where will the bins go? Is there enough space if you're going to put the bins on the verge, if I read it properly? Or are we going for those big, large bins that get rolled out and emptied, in one big hit?
Through the chair, our understanding based on the waste storage layout is that collection is to happen within the site itself rather than presenting bins on the verge. I might also take the opportunity to clarify the bulk bin because I've got the plan in front of me. The bulk bin location is actually within the front of the site itself, so it's not in the verge area. So collection of the bulk bin will happen within the site rather than the verge because simply they don't even have a verge space other than a crossover.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Thank you, Chair.
All good. Councillor Marks, any questions for the staff? Can't hear you, sorry. Councillor Marks, we can't hear you. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No, right. No, I haven't got anything. Questions for them exactly. I'll speak later. Thank you.
Any questions from members in the room?
No, thank you.
I've got a question, but it might actually go back to the applicant. It's to do with that pickleball court. And Peter mentioned that we might better see players from that edge. Looking at the plans, it seemed to me the danger is a pickleball going over the fence. onto the road. And so my understanding of pickleball courts is they have almost a cage around them, a high fence around them. So, but you haven't shown that on the plan. So what we'll see is a high fence.
So no, so there's sort of several different ways. There's pickleball, then there's paddle, which is a different type, but similar, which is the one you can hit off the fences and that sort of thing. Pickleball is more, I suppose, more closely aligned to like a half-court tennis court, but the balls are very heavy, and so they don't actually bounce that much. We actually had a discussion with it. We suspect what will probably happen is there'll be some sort of temporary netting, and when people are using it, just goes up on Graveston Highway and then comes down once the people are finished with it. But it's something that we'll give greater consideration to in the design development stage.
Okay. So then going back to the offices, if I may, do you then accept the arguments presented by the applicant that perhaps planter boxes are not appropriate there or necessary there, that there'll be some activity seen as opposed to plants?
Yeah, through the chair. So our position on the landscaping is mostly to do with, I suppose, the aesthetics of the building and what quality it can improve in terms of the facade. And we do acknowledge the planter box may or may not help prevent ball from going over to Graveston Highway. But to address the applicant's point about not having the plant means, you know, having activation on that level. Well, our I guess counter argument to that is our Great Eastern Highway strategy emphasis on activation is really at the ground floor level rather than the upper floor. And going back to the landscaping outcome perspective, it's rightfully what the deputy presiding member has mentioned. If, let's say, while they're playing the game that they need to put some temporary netting, it might be, then the landscaping could help soften that impact. And before arriving into this meeting room, I've actually refreshed my memory of what's next door at 3 Homely Court. They've actually got trees and some low-level planting on their, I believe it was the 4th or 5th level. So having the planters there with landscaping really just carries over that landscaping at that higher level. And we can see that, you know, because that condition or that dot point doesn't specifically ask for a whole redesign of that frontage, really is up to the applicant what planter or whether it's a movable planter that they want to propose along that side.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to go back to the applicant team on that one and acknowledge the comments you've made, particularly about the fact that you weren't intending on putting irrigation there and there's going to be a financial impost with a development of this scale. Surely extension of irrigation to a planter box on that side is not going to be the death knell for this development. And so I'd like your comments on that. In terms of the planting on that side, there's a lot of planting that happens on southern sides of buildings. So unless there's something I'm missing, I wouldn't mind you explaining that a little better for me as to why that's an issue.
Okay, Chair. So from our perspective, we thought the focus was to mediate the boundary between this development and Springview Towers because it steps down in terms of the podium level. And so we've got the focus on landscape to the northwest. And with this project, and this is fundamental to all of our projects where we are looking at the affordable market, we have been very careful to address cost impacts across all elements of a project. And again, so when we look at something that says, okay, so now we would need to, and you might say it's a small cost and maybe it's only going to be, you know, 10, 20 bucks a square metre to make sure that whole level is irrigated on the southern side. It's how those cumulatively build up and causes issues. And I guess the other concern that we do have is, we've done the focus to the northwest. We're mediating between the two projects there. And when you've got additional areas that are landscaped and that have to be irrigated and managed and maintained, and people are going to have to come out and sweep up leaves or whatever like. And what this does is it just increases the strata fees and the costs. And you can see from this project we've been very mindful. So we've deleted a swimming pool. First time we've actually done that ever. But again, it was to try and make sure that this project, from an ongoing operational point of view, is not be as expensive as, say, a standard mid-range apartment development is, because having a pool that adds a considerable percentage to the strata levies. So I'm not saying, and obviously if the panel decides that, forms a view that it will retain the condition, we will still move on and we'll do the best I can to address it. It's just everything around this project, we have been trying to do a good design and a great outcome while trying to keep this very much in the affordable price point that this will launch to.
Thank you.
Follow-up question. Is there an alternative to the planter boxes? So you've got glazing to a certain height. Is there some way of treating that? Part of the art. To decorate that in some way.
It's potentially, and we can examine that. And I think, as the city was saying, if this was a condition that was retained, it'll be something that we will then have to look at how will we address it, and we'll have to engage with the city. So it means that we do that. Thank you.
Any other questions for the staff? I have a few, if you don't mind, and there are related conditions. So condition 4 requires submission of a detailed schedule of external materials, colours and material and so on ahead of a building permit application. But I don't see any wording in there that relates to implementation of that schedule. So is that intentional? Do you intend that that schedule comes to you as part of the building permit, it's approved as part of the building permit, and therefore it needs to be implemented as part of that schedule? Is that?
Through the chair, that's precisely correct. That through, the idea of the process is they submit the schedule the same time as the building permit, or even if they submit prior to the building permit, that once that schedule is approved, officers make sure that that material is also reflected on the building permit accordingly.
Okay. In terms of public art, you've got conditions that relate to the provision of public art, but I don't see any mention of a cash in lieu option. Is there a cash in lieu option for the provision of public art, or have you already agreed that public art will be installed with the applicant?
Yeah, so through the chair, so maybe I'll give the panel some context of the public art policy. We do have the cash in lieu option. However, at this current stage, the city doesn't have a public art strategy across the city finalized. And more importantly, with this particular application in front of us, the applicant has actually put forward public art plan. So our response to that as well, they're proposing public art on site, so therefore requiring them to submit a public art concept for the site itself is the appropriate course.
Thank you. Could you give me some comment on the applicant's concerns about condition 26, and specifically whether or not, when you're clearing these conditions, that there will be some pragmatism in clearing that condition, given it is seldom that there is no glimpse of any service infrastructure from any street. Are you able to confirm that there will be a pragmatic approach to that in the clearing of the condition?
Certainly. Through the chair, we certainly, in dealing with condition 26, as opposed to put in layperson's term, the intent of that condition really is to not have services being obvious when you're just driving past or going past. If, let's say, you have visual of a service by strategically locate yourself to be able to peer through, that's not the intent of the condition. It's really just as you look at the building on first glimpse, do you see the service? Are the services really obvious? And if the answer is no, then it would satisfy that condition.
In relation to the applicant's request to shift condition 36 to an advice note, is there any specific reason you've included it as a condition, given it is a third-party requirement under separate?
Through the chair, so that condition was recommended by Perth Airport. I think it's our position that we wouldn't be objecting to that being moved to an advice note.
All right, and then very last thing, I want to go back to the planter box on in the pickleball court. Can you just clarify for me whether or not that DRP suggestion that a planter box be installed there and landscaping, was the purpose of that just to increase more landscaping? Was it to soften the appearance of that facade? What was the purpose of seeking landscaping on that?
Yeah. So through the chair, my recollection in that DRP meeting, it was firstly, I believe, motivated by the amenity of the pickleball court, because if the panel is aware, the applicant has proposed landscaping on 2 bounds of the pickleball court. I believe the DRP comments about adding that planter along the Grayson Highway interface was to complete that from an internal amenity aspect, because their comments also flowed on to talk about possible incorporation of chair as well. So I believe that was the initial motivation, and I suppose they took that opportunity to also say, well, this approach not only improves the internal amenity, but also from the Grayson Highway aspect, you do get that landscaping at the level.
Thank you, Brandon. All right. Yep.
One question, just looking at advice note 8, it reads like a condition to me.
It does.
Yeah.
Make it condition 37.
Through the chair, so advice note 8, it is a standard advice note that the city does implement when there's development close to existing street trees, which is the case with this development. If it's better placed as a condition, the city wouldn't be objecting to that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions of the city officers? No? Let's move on to the report then. We have a recommendation for approval in front of us in the responsible authority report. I will seek a mover and seconder for that recommendation. Does anyone wish to move the recommendation for approval? Thank you, Clayton Hyam. Do I have a seconder? Luigi. Clayton.
Thank you, presiding member. This is always an interesting location for me because the planning framework has many layers to it, and they each require some particular aspect to be considered. Through the local planning scheme 15, Springs structure plan, and of course then the local planning policy number 7. The RAR advises that the best guiding document is the draft local planning policy number 20. And this envisages buildings up to 20 stories in the Springs. And as the officers mentioned, this is very similar to the corridor structure plan for Grayson Highway. And given the height of many of the surrounding buildings and the local context, for this proposed development, I'm quite happy to accept local planning policy number 20 as the guide. and exercise discretion necessary in relation to the height. Having said that, I acknowledge the points raised by the objectors, but I don't agree that having to meet the terms of the current policy, and it's only that, a due regard document, would provide a better outcome in the context of the existing and surrounding development. The applicants responded to the concerns raised by the DRP, and where they haven't, appropriate conditions are recommended. The applicant has also addressed the internal traffic engineering issues, provided a sustainability report, and amended plans to provide 2 accessible units to meet silver level of the accessibility requirements. Looking at areas for discretionary consideration, I support the arguments presented in the RAR in relation to setbacks and the proposed interface with Preston Highway. Although I do acknowledge the developer's concerns at putting the planter boxes along the edge of the pickleball court. And in relation to that, and Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment to, well, first amendment perhaps is to delete condition 1.
Sure, so delete condition 1, that relates to a dual approval under the MRS. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? I'm happy to second that.
Okay.
Speak to that amendment.
No, I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Thank you. I will very briefly, just for those who may be watching online, that condition was required some time ago, but is no longer needed following commencement of the new Metropolitan Region scheme on the 31st of March. So it is redundant. Do you wish to close on that condition?
No. Okay.
All right, we're going to be voting on that amendment to delete condition 1. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Back to you.
Just then moving to condition 5A, I would like to include after planting, so include planter box and planting or other treatment to the balustrade.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that amendment?
Second.
Seconded. Member D'Alessandro, do you wish to speak to it?
I think what I'm trying to do here is to provide an option for the applicants. It just widens it out, allows for other consideration to the balustrade or the glass balustrade along that frontage, and I think they can still achieve some of the outcomes that the DRP were trying to achieve.
Do you wish to speak a second?
No, thank you. I agree.
Does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment? I will speak against it, actually, and the reason I will speak against it is if the design review panel was of a mind to ask for the planter boxes to improve the amenity of the users of this space, I don't think that is necessary. If the planter boxes were being requested to improve the facade or soften the facade from Great Eastern Highway, when you look at that facade of that building, I don't know that necessarily for the cost and maintenance impost of installing planter boxes and some landscaping on that side, that it is actually going to make that much of a difference to that elevation. It's actually a very minor addition to that elevation. And personally, I feel that to have any interaction between a court that's being used and Great Eastern Highway is a little novel, and I actually would support not having that first subclause at all. So I don't think an alternate to the planters is necessary. I don't know that the planters are necessary, so I'm not going to vote in favour of that amendment. Back to the mover to close on the amendment.
No further.
Further to add. All those in favour of that amendment? Or against? 1. The amendment is carried. Back to you.
Okay. Just a further if I may. Section 28 to change the word employees to residents.
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Will second.
I think the reason is that employees was the wrong word, and it was always meant to be about residents.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against this amendment? It is simply rectifying the incorrect use of the word employees. There are no employees, and so replace it with residents. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against that amendment? No? Close?
No.
No? All those in favour of that amendment? Carried unanimously.
And second last is to place condition 36 on the condition list and to an advice note.
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? I will second. Do you wish to provide your reason?
I think the reason is that as you mentioned, this is subject to third-party approval, and it is not appropriate as a condition, but it can be seen as an advice note.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak for or against that amendment? Let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Just to wind up, I was going to change the advice note 8 to a condition, but I think it's probably linked to advice note 7 as well. So I'm happy to leave those there, even though they read like conditions. I'm sure they aren't applied as conditions. So just to wind up, the resident parking surplus and the visitor parking shortfall is noted, and I support the arguments presented in the RAR and will be happy to exercise discretion in that regard. So all in all, I'm more than happy with the proposal and happy to support it.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the program?
Yes, thanks. I will be supporting it. In my view, it's consistent with the planning policies and character guidelines. It's compatible with the height objectives of up to 2-storey as per the scheme. Very comprehensive report. Overall, the bulk is, in my view, are consistent with the planning framework. I'm happy about the plot ratio and height, and also about the visitor parking shortfall, noting that there is an excess in resident parking and also the provision of alternative modes of transport. On that basis, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Do our members online, our local government members, wish to speak for or against the substantive motion? Mayor Rossi.
Thank you. I'll speak against. Can I start with my biggest concern is the parking, the loss of 5 visitor bays in an area that's bursting at the seams. Now, we're told that there's excess parking, but there is no arrangement in before me that tells me that they'll be able to use excess resident parking. The city's just installed sensors down there because we had problems in the springs. I don't understand how we keep on linking bicycles to these visitor bays. You have to drive down there to jump on a bike, unless I'm missing something. So that I don't see how that can be linked at all. There's talk about the 2 public open spaces. Well, one is a very small little slither. You heard one of the officers say, no wider than a road roughly, a Leslie D Park. It really doesn't count. The sheer size, I'm concerned how it dwarfs what's behind it and what's diagonally to it. The overshadowing of the complex next door from the morning, they'll lose all their morning sun. If I read it properly, from 9 to 12 p.m, that will have a huge impact. And For me, my biggest concern is that there's a reliance now on a policy yet to be adopted. Now, I've been on DAPS long enough to hear over and over people saying this has not yet been adopted. We can't give due consideration to it. So I won't be giving it due consideration because it's not yet been adopted. So these are the reasons why I won't be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rossi. Councillor Marx, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy with the development. I think this is a typical development in the Springs, and can you see me there?
Yes.
I've lost you.
Oh, we can see you.
Can you hear us, Councillor Marx?
Yes, I can. Second.
We
Right.
can see you, so if you want to keep speaking,
No, I
that's
can now see it. Right. No, it's a typical development that's happened in the Springs. It fits in well with all the other developments that are there, in my opinion. It is 52 metres high. Considering the corridor plan where we're looking to put 20-storey buildings along Great Eastern Highway, I think that this fits in. I'm unhappy, as the mayor is, with the fact that the visitor parking bays is a shortfall. Unfortunately, in the Springs, one of the things that's happened is that parking has become unbelievably bad. We shouldn't be putting in shortfalls as for visitor parking. I won't be voting against it because of that. However, I do think that this building is a sign of the time building. You heard from Scott Cameron there about 1-bedroom apartments and studio apartments. I can remember back in around about 2007 or 8 when the Saressa building was put up, and I'm not certain whether Scott Cameron was there at that point. I think he was, and it was 2- and 3-bedroom apartments, and they wanted to put some of the 3-bedroom apartments and make them 2-bedroom apartments and 2-bedroom apartments, 1-bedroom apartments. The council went mad at that point and refused to do it. Today, we're only building 2-bedroom apartments and 1-bedroom apartments and studios. So things have changed, and as we've seen, Finbar goes with the times and have tried to make everything affordable so that not only do they not go broke, but the public has somewhere to live. So at this point, I will be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marx. I will speak briefly. Before speaking to the substantive motion, I would like to move a further couple of amendments. I would like to amend condition 4 that deals with the schedule of materials, finishes and colours. I'd like to add some wording requiring ongoing implementation of the schedule. So the second sentence of the condition would then read, the approved schedule of external materials, finishes and colours shall be maintained for the life of development unless otherwise agreed by the City of Belmont. I'll give you my reasons if I have a seconder. Seconded, Clayton, thank you. As per my question of the staff earlier, it is assumed that implementation of the schedule that is provided to the city will be required as part of the issue of the building permit. But there's currently no wording requiring ongoing implementation of that schedule. And as we know, those external things get changed over time through maintenance and so on. So the additional wording is to make it clear that that schedule needs to be implemented on an ongoing basis unless otherwise approved by the city. We don't want the applicant or the strata body in future during maintenance of the building having to come back to the city to get further approval because they're changing a paint colour. So that just introduces a level of pragmatism in terms of ongoing management of that. Do you wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak for or against the addition of this wording? No, let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Then I would like to amend condition 20 as requested by the applicant as a tidy up, just to clarify that the condition applies to communal and visitor bike bays. The condition would then read, prior to occupation of the development, a minimum of 40 communal and visitor bicycle bays is to be installed and thereafter maintained, and so on. Do I have a second to that amendment? Seconded, Clayton Hyam. Thank you. This is just to clarify which bicycle bays the condition refers to as the residential bays are located within the individual storerooms. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I'm happy to approve the development. I think it provides much needed affordable housing and a good diversity of accommodation options in an area close to the city and well serviced by public transport. I think it's a well-designed building, consistent with other established built form in the area, and the city has done a comprehensive assessment with the input of their design review panel to outline how the proposal meets the design principles of SPP 7.0. Note there were some objections when the proposal was advertised for public comment, and these primarily related to height, overshadowing, setbacks, traffic and parking, and impacts on property values. The latter of these concerns is not a matter that this panel can reasonably take account of when considering the planning merits of a proposal. The other matters raised to concerns I feel have been responded to well in the city's responsible authority report. I understand there are concerns about height because there is a significant departure between the height proposed and the detailed area plan under local planning policy 7. But just because the height proposed exceeds a policy requirement is not a valid reason not to support the proposal. It's the impact of that height variation that needs to be considered. And in my view, it appears that local planning policy 7 is outdated in this regard. Whether or not local planning policy 20 has been finally endorsed or not, I'm happy to park that for the minute and just say I feel that local planning policy 7 is outdated. Numerous developments have been submitted and approved which have exceeded this height requirement, not only demonstrating the extra demand for height in this location, but also that the extra height has not had undue impact on the surrounding area. The extent of overshadowing, which could be a product for height in other cases, complies with the R codes and the policy, and the setbacks also comply. In terms of traffic and parking, a traffic impact statement has been provided to demonstrate there is sufficient capacity within the surrounding road network to accommodate any traffic to be generated by the development. And there is a surplus of parking bays on site for residents. Although there's a slight shortfall in visitor bays, the site is well located close to bus stops and bike paths, and a condition requiring a parking management plan has been recommended to address parking allocation and to address the shortfall in visitor parking. So all in all, on that basis, I'm very happy to approve. With that, I will hand back to the mover to close.
Madam Chair, I don't really need to make any other comments, but you've addressed all the concerns or the issues I might have made in a rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will put the substantive recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried 4-1 with Mayor Rossi voting against. Thank you for that. Moving then on to item 4, Belmont today, Form 2 applications, there are nil. Item 5, Section 1 SAT reconsiderations also. With that, I would like to thank Mayor Robert Rossi and Councillor Phil Marks, our members from Belmont, for your participation and attendance, and also the City of Belmont staff for attending today. I would like to now hand over to the City of Fremantle item with a procedural motion to adjourn for a couple of minutes to take a comfort break. Do I have a seconder? All those in favour? Carried. Back, everybody. Welcome back to our meeting. We are moving on now to Part D, the City of Fremantle, and with that I welcome Councillor Andrew Sullivan and Councillor Ingrid Van Dawson, our local government DAP members for the City of Fremantle, to the panel. Item 1 is declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within Part D of the agenda and the Part D related information. Before I ask you to confirm by a show of hands that you have considered that information, could I check that you had the chance to review the email that was received this morning, the late information? Yes. Thank you. Just for those who may be watching online, if additional information is received within 24 hours of the meeting, we may not necessarily publish that on our website, but we can take it into account in the meeting. It will be published after. So could I please confirm by a show of hands that all members have considered all information? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 2, disclosures of interest. I have received 2 disclosures of impartiality interest from our local government members because the application has been put before them at a briefing session. In that regard, I note our standing declaration of interest that if the agenda items have been considered through that council process, they acknowledge that in accordance with section 249 of our Code of Conduct, that they have participated, but they are not bound by any previous decisions or resolutions, and they undertake to exercise independent judgment in relation to matters before them. I have considered these matters, and there are no impartiality interests that would prevent these councillors from participating or voting on this matter today. I haven't received any other disclosures of interest. Do any members, other members wish to make any other declarations? No? Excellent. All right, moving on to item 3 then, our formal application for the City of Fremantle. Number 10, Henderson Street, Fremantle, a 4 to 6 story hotel development, including restaurant, cafe, small bar and shop land uses at ground level. DAP number 25/02940. There are 3 presenters on this item today. Christopher Barrow from 5/8, speaking in support of the proposal. Mark Jevons from Woods Bagot, speaking in support, and Sean Fairfell from Natural Planning, speaking in support. I remind all presenters that in accordance with clause 482 of our standing orders, your presentation is limited to 3 minutes. We've read all the written documentation you've provided, so we're across all of that. So I encourage you to focus on the key points you'd like to get across within your designated 3-minute time frame. We'll be able to ask you questions after your presentation, and when you get close to your 3 minutes, I will ask you to wrap up. Ms. Barrow, you are first, and your time starts when you are ready.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Dale, and good morning to all. Only just want to say a quick thing, just a quick note of thanks to the City of Fremantle for a really constructive and collaborative engagement that we've had through the process of design and up to submission of the DA. We certainly welcome the responsible authorities' report recommendation for approval. We would, however, like to raise and request some minor amendments which would have been sent through our plan of lateral planning, and which we will talk through in more detail. But we're very supportive of the development, and we look forward to hopefully approval today so we can get moving.
Thank you. I might roll through all the presentations and you can ask questions of you as a group collectively. So, Mark, starts with
just doing a very quick review of the design of the hotel and our vision for the Spices design is to create a hotel that feels distinctly Fremantle, grounded in materials, colours and local character, refined and contemporary. From the exterior to the interior, the design takes cues from Fremantle's limestone heritage buildings, its warm tones and metalwork, and allowing the hotel to sit comfortably in its setting while reflecting the charm of and individuality that makes Fremantle very unique. Okay, next slide, please. On our ground plan, we've created a fully accessible public ground plan with high levels of activation, 100% activated frontages to William Street and Henderson Streets, with all services moved to Paddy Troy Lane for continuous street activation. We have an entry courtyard garden, which acts as both the front door to the hotel, a quiet retreat, and a destination in itself. Along Paddy Troy Mall, we've upgraded that through new paving treatments, providing delineated footpaths to both sides of the mall, creating safe access for hotel staff, Paddy Troy Mall tenants, and to the public as well. And while the building services are positioned along Paddy Troy Mall, surveillance and activation are maintained through end-of-trip facilities, workshops, maintenance, office, and the corner tenancy to Spices Lane on the left-hand side. Go to the next page, please. Spices Lane is a key feature of the design. It continues Fremantle's tradition of activating laneways as social landscape spaces. We've created a 5.5 metre wide fully activated laneway open 24/7 with vehicle connection to the hospital. Our large corner tenancy is suited to a small bar and food and beverage, while 2 additional spaces are provided with flexible sizes to accommodate a range of local Fremantle operators. Next page, please. In terms of the massing, the building steps down from 6 stories to 4 stories towards Henderson Street with a corner setback that reduces the visual impact and respects the scale of Waters Colleges and Fremantle markets as well. The stepping helps reduce overshadowing to Henderson Street, improving sunlight access and the amenity of the adjoining heritage buildings. The eroded corner creates space for an active pool deck, food and beverage tenancy, and connects directly to the liveliness of Henderson Street and extends activity through the day and into the evening. And at ground level, a colonnade wraps around Henderson and William Street, strengthening pedestrian connectivity and integrates the hotel into the urban fabric. Next page, please. This is a plan of the podium. As you can see there, the pool and the hotel F&B sit over the corner of William and Henderson, creating a strong visual and social focus. In addition, a central void connects down to the lower courtyard, linking the hotel spaces to the public. The large terrace and terrace rooms to the left-hand side there offer guests a different hotel experience, being rooms with connectivity to the external courtyard space. This space can also have the flexibility to host events and gatherings, including weddings and private functions. Page, please.
I'll let you know you're at your 3 minutes, but I'll let you use the time that Chris didn't, so.
Seconds, that's fine. These are the typical floors. We've protected external walkway that we have linking the 2 buildings between the hotel wings, which provides a very different hotel experience and is true in Fremantle. And a variety of rooms, from standard rooms, accessible rooms, and larger suites as well. We also have naturally ventilated corridors to the Tower 1 with louvered windows. Finally, our design celebrates Fremantle's rich materiality and scale. It's a refined and contextual response that activates the entire site while respecting its heritage setting. Spices will bring new life to this corner of Fremantle, create a layered and welcoming precinct that feels truly local and that draws on the city's character to deliver a high-quality, sustainable hotel that will engage with the community and provide meaningful contribution to the local economy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Panel members, thank you for allowing us to talk to you this morning. You would have seen my request, and I'm assuming the additional with respect to conditions 4, 5, and 17, we understand that the city is comfortable with the amendments that we proposed. With respect to condition 24, which deals with the Green Star certification, we would like to amend condition 24, which requires certification or similar prior to occupation. We can't get Green Star certification for at least 12 months after the development has been operating. So we would request that the words prior to occupation are replaced with within 24 months of practical completion. That allows the 12 months operation that the building needs, and then some time to finalise a report and get the certification through to the city. Condition 18 is, I guess, the one thing that we understand the city don't agree with removing this condition. We're in the view that the circumstances of the site, the history, don't meet the test provided in clause 13B of the Schedule A of the scheme. That is, the council has reasonable evidence that the place may include contents materials. There is no reasonable evidence that these materials are likely to be present on the site. The city's assessment identified that sometimes these materials were included in fill. The fill came from other sites, but there's no evidence to suggest that was the case, to absolutely suggest that was the case here. The site's been utilised for a car park for a considerable period of time. And the wording and scope of the requirements in the condition as written don't provide the certainty or clear direction with respect to the extent of the investigations, how deep they need to be, where they need to be. And on that basis, we don't think the condition is valid and necessary. It's important to note that 5.8 are committed to ensuring that adequate measures are in place for the identification of any historical material should they be found during the preliminary works. We are of the view that condition 14, which requires the preparation of a construction management plan, and specifically item Q within that, adequately deal with the preparation of procedures to ensure that the works are monitored, and then what happens if historical found. So we think that the intent of council's or the city's requirement in terms of making sure that historical materials are identified can be dealt with via the construction management plan rather than a archaeological dig. So on that basis, we're requesting the condition 18 be deleted, and there's an advice note also 18 that can also be removed. Otherwise, again, reiterate that we're overall recommendation from the city and the process that we've been through to get to this point. Basis, we'd ask you to approve the proposal subject to the alternative recommendation that I've provided.
Thank you. Are there questions of this applicant? Councillor Van Dijk. No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Yes. I had a question in relation to the awnings over the public streets, so Henderson Street, William Street, and note that you have made them wider, but the scheme, the policies, local planning policies require continuous weather protected awnings over the footpath of public streets. And just reviewing your drawings, one, they're not continuous. They're sort of, they look like, perhaps you can explain in a bit more detail, they look like canvas awnings that are just at each bay, but not continuous, but they're only 2 metres wide as well. So I'm just wondering if you could explain a little bit more detail as to what those awnings are constructed of, whether they're going to be substantial enough to deal with the fairly hostile conditions that you get in Fremantle, and why they're not continuous, if you like. I'm not concerned about where you've got the colonnades, but I am concerned about everywhere else and being able to get from the footpaths to the colonnades. So if you could perhaps provide a bit more detail about that through the presiding member. Thank you.
So the colonnades, in terms of materiality, the intent is that would be an accurate type of canvas awning. They are split between the columns. So the columns are about 600, 580 wide. So there will be a slight break there, but the intent is that as any major city or any, as you walk around, there are moments of, okay, you will get some rain on you, but the intent with these is that you can pause. There is enough protection around the site to be able to get from one side to the other with reasonable cover, obviously, before you then go on to your journey through Henderson Street. Generally, that's where most of the awnings are. So we acknowledge that there are some breaks in there, but the overall intent is that we are providing a large amount of protection on that ground plane in general.
And what about where the awnings stop and the colonnades start? There is, obviously, again, a gap. Is that?
The intent will be that we can pull an awning across. to that colonnade. So you can get a continuation through there. So we are looking through in our design development, responding to various little iterations like that. So we can pull that across and have continuous.
I'll just do a follow-up question. No. Are the awnings retractable or be permanent?
No, they'll be fixed, yeah.
No, that's fine.
I've just got one for clarity. You talk about deleting condition 18 on the basis that you wanted to add it to the construction management plan, or did I get that wrong?
No, so the condition 18 talks about archaeological.
Yeah, archaeological. Yep.
We think we can, without doing archaeological investigations, because we don't think there is an absolute need for it, but we will have measures in place during the initial construction where if we find anything during those works, we can then have a process to stop works and then undertake unnecessary investigation at that event.
Of that. So you've asked to delete 18 on the basis that you'll add some of the wording into condition 14, but you have not. So in your alternate wording, you haven't actually opted any of the wording that says, I think it's, so I think identification of any heritage material, but you've not shown that you've included that in.
I don't think we need to. So condition 14Q
deals with the construction management.
The construction management plan, and it deals then with any other measures that so the overall construction management plan conditions deals with traffic and movements and it also includes subpoint Q, which is any other matters. So we think that the construction management plan, when we write it and prepare it, we will be able to address the heritage and the identification of any heritage materials as part of that condition. So we didn't need to amend the condition to deal with it specifically. We can cover it off in those other matters that are addressed in that condition. Equally, you could add R. I had to work through the alphabet then, sorry. You can add an R condition that deals with the identification and process around any historical matters, either or.
Back to you, Lou. Anything else?
That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, I've already had my question answered, so thank you for that. Unless there are any other questions for the applicant team, we have Chloe with us, Chloe Johnston from the City of Fremantle. And we have the ability to ask Chloe some questions. Right, any questions?
Yes, thank you. Question just regarding condition 18. Could you just provide a little bit of background or information as to why you think that condition is required? The likelihood of archaeological findings on the site?
Yes, through the presiding member, there was a building called the Spices Building, which is why this site is called the Spices site. It was demolished, I think, in the 70s, and effectively the site was sort of just levelled and built on. Our heritage team, in reviewing it, probably disagree with the applicant that there may be a reasonable prospect of finding some materials there. And the best process for that is to get someone who is qualified to monitor it. So effectively, it doesn't need to be a massive dig on site. It really just needs a methodology from an appropriately qualified person through that construction process to monitor and record anything that is found. So it's not going to involve a dig and re-establishing the old basement and things that were on site. It's really just making sure that it's based on evidence and you're not relying on a demolition contractor or a builder to do that monitoring.
Just as a follow-up, so what would that plan look like versus putting that into the construction management plan? What would a separate archaeological study look like? What would they do?
So they would look at the documentary evidence that both the city and the applicant's heritage professionals have and put a plan together for that monitoring. So whether there's some sites that they would test and then some instructions for the contractors on site for what to look out for and to watch. So effectively, they would submit a report before any construction started to let us know what their methodology and their plan would be to monitor and how they would then record that the findings.
So how basic would such a plan need to be? Is that something that they could put together as part of the construction management plan in consultation with the city's heritage officers, or do you require an independent consultant to go and prepare a plan?
The city's policy does talk to an independent consultant requiring being prepared.
Can I just follow it up? I'm a little puzzled because I understand that there was a basement in the Spices building and that's just been backfilled. Did the basement cover the whole area? Application?
I'd need to look at previous plans, but the majority of the site had the building.
So I'm trying to figure out what archaeological artifacts we might find in the fill.
Sometimes it's old footings, and it's probably as simple as that. Old footings, old building material that can be found.
Thanks.
Back to you, Councillor Mentos.
I did just want to hear from you regarding the other proposed amendments to conditions. So that was 4, 5, 17 and 24. In particular, the 24 practical completion. 17 with the heritage. Yeah, I just wanted your comments to see if you were comfortable with those proposed amendments.
I'll run through the document that was sent through this morning. So condition 4 relates to the pickup and drop off bay and the request to change that to Henderson Street. My recommendation might actually be to just say road reserve. The reason there's the confusion between William and Henderson is that ideally one day it will be on William Street, but there's an ongoing project to look at that streetscape and it's a fair way off resolution. At the moment, the logical spot is to put those bays in the Henderson Street Reserve. Obviously, we don't know when this construction will start, but I think everyone is in agreement that the applicant will need to construct those bays out the front of the hotel. So possibly a adjoining road reserve rather than locking in Henderson or William might be the best option.
Can I just poke a little bit on that? Is that not very open-ended because you don't know what that's going to look like? You're looking at a plan now for that Border Street upgrade along William, but you're not sure exactly what that's going to look like. So in terms of a planning condition that is certain, is that reasonable to leave it that open-ended? Because it could then be any road reserve and the scope of the works is undetermined.
So the applicant has provided 2 plans in their documents that show those bays in the Henderson Street Mall and on William Street. Both options work. The one on Henderson Street works on today's traffic conditions. The William Street one might work if that's what the city decides to go with that urban design option. But either way, as long as it is adjoining the development, but if the applicant would prefer Henderson Street, that's okay. But it might be that the conditions have changed substantially because at the moment, the city is in the process of taking those car bays out of Henderson Street and pedestrianising that area in front of the markets. And I believe the applicant would like to see that area being used for things like alfresco, and having car bays in that little pocket is probably not ideal for the longer term prospect.
So if we were to delete reference to a specific street, it really still only locks them into providing 2 bays. It's not more than that. So whether the 2 bays are Henderson or William,
correct.
Only 2 bays, correct?
The next condition was related to the request to remove, on the advice of the Design Advisory Committee, from the review of the materials, colours and finishes. Look, like the applicants pointed out in their document, our call as to whether we got the panel to review that regardless. We tend to put it in the condition so it is clear that that is what will occur. If you would like that removed, I don't have any objection to that, but given the panel provides us out that professional advice on those materials and finishes, that would be the process from our end. Condition 17. So this was requested by the Heritage Council. I did hear from officers at DPLH on this, but no formal change to the comment was provided. The previous approval for this site for a hotel, it did only request the dilapidation reports for the Waters cottages, and we didn't receive any updated advice as to why it had been expanded. So probably not for the city to comment on that one, but the Heritage Council didn't get the opportunity to revise that, and officers at DPLH didn't provide any updated advice on whether there was any additional reason why it had been expanded to those additional properties. And the last one was in relation to the Green Star. I don't have any objection to that change to within 24 months of practical completion. If that is the applicant's aim to go for the Green Star certification, that's fantastic. If that helps with that clear response.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Van Dorsen. Any further questions? From me. Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a couple of the matters with Chloe. Regarding the road reserve at the car bays, is there anything in the planning approval that prohibits the city having a different point of view down the track? In other words, if the car bays are allocated as part of the planning approval, would it still be the city's prerogative as to whether they stay in that location or get relocated, or in fact disappear altogether? Or is it somehow bound even though it's not on the subject site?
No, they wouldn't be bound. Effectively, it would just then mean there's no pick-up drop-off area for the hotel later on. They would be effectively loading bays, so other people would be able to swing in, drop off. Ubers and things would be able to drop off for other people, so they would become public bays. It's effectively a contribution from the developer, given they're not providing any on-site car parking for the benefit of the community as well as their own development. So there wouldn't be any formal agreement to tie those bays to the hotel.
So in a hypothetical, if the city, if they were built on Henderson Street and then in 5 years' time the city is doing its William Street project and wanted to close the Henderson Street Mall completely to all vehicles and have the car base shifted, would it be the likelihood that they would offer the landowner to build some car bays but could seek that the landowner paid for those at that time, or not? In other words, that would be a future negotiation that's completely beyond and past the planning process.
I think it'd probably be unreasonable to ask them to pay again for new bays. I think once they're built, that's their obligation met. If the city wanted to, because of streetscape upgrades, move those bays, they could. I know there are ongoing discussions about the outlook and the design of Henderson Street Mall, and the applicant may well contribute to those later on, but that would be a separate discussion and a separate negotiation. But if they built and paid for those bays, I don't think it would be reasonable to, because the city wanted to move the bays, require that they pay again to construct them.
If I may, just in terms of the Design Advisory Committee element, within the city's own staff, do you have the expertise in the planning section to deal with matters of design?
Yes, we do. The benefit we've got of the Design Advisory Committee is that it is a panel of mostly working architects, so they can give us some feedback about the quality and the robustness of materials. We do have urban design and heritage architects on staff though that contribute to that advice.
Sorry, can I just follow up on that? You're not saying you won't put it to the Design Advisory Committee if we remove that wording. You probably will anyway and take their advice anyway, because that's your standard practice. It just removes it from the condition.
That's correct, yes.
Further questions, councillor?
I've got one just for clarity on condition 17, and I did read the various reports, the heritage report. It says there the preparation of the dilapidation report. Are you happy with it just being the Waters cottages? Because I would have thought you would have had quite a few dilapidation reports for the Waters cottages. We're always going on in there.
Yeah, this condition was requested by the Heritage Council, so their request was for it to go further. There was no objection raised previously by the city's heritage team for it to just be the Waters cottages. I think taking it further is just a more cautious approach.
Thank you.
Just on condition 8, talking about the landscape plan shall be completed. You mean implemented? Or is completed mean the same?
I would mean the same. I'm happy for you to amend that.
That's fine then. I thought it was a plan to be completed.
Any other questions?
No.
Oh, I've got a couple about some conditions, if you don't mind. So, condition 5, we've talked about Design Advisory Committee aside. How do you ensure ongoing implementation of that palette once approved? Do you lock it down through approval of the building permit?
Yes, so we expect all of that detail is shown on the building.
Okay. Similarly, condition 9 requires submission of an outdoor lighting plan. Do you also lock that down through issue of the building permit?
Yes, so by putting the prior to the lodgement of a building permit, we do check those requirements and expect all those conditions are addressed.
So the building plans need to show all that detail. Yes. Then condition 13, the way it's currently worded requires provision of end of trip facilities prior to issue of a building permit. So should this reference details of end of trip facilities? I think that's what you mean, but the way it currently worded
on a plan, you mean? Or?
Yeah, so currently the way condition 13 is worded, it's prior to issue of a building permit, end of trip facility shall be provided. It details.
Fair point, presiding member.
Minor, but
no, I agree. Yep.
And then condition 19 requires the interpretation plan to be submitted. Again, does that plan, the details of that plan then get locked in through details on the building plans? Or does that need to be implemented separately?
So that would need to be implemented separately potentially, because we haven't gotten clear information on exactly how that material will be used, and it might well be works that don't require a building permit. Previous proposals by the applicant were that they would be used in public artworks. Recent proposals have been using it in paving and landscaping. So it may not be works that are shown in the building.
When would you expect those works to be completed?
I would suggest prior to occupation of the development.
Prior to occupation. Okay. Right, I think that's all I have for you at the minute. Does anyone have any further questions for the city officers? No? Okay, we will then look at moving to the report. And we have a report that recommends approval subject to a range of conditions. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Sullivan, do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Van Dawson. Councillor Sullivan, over to you.
Thank you, presiding member. Obviously, as we all know, this is a replacement proposal for an item that was previously considered by the DAPs. And in many ways, this proposal is an improvement in terms of the public realm, particularly the heritage elements located in the Henderson Street Mall. and the like. I don't see that there would be any justification for anything other than an approval in this scenario where the impact of the development has in fact improved and the mitigation on the heritage, the really important heritage buildings over the road is a lot better. I'm happy to leave the issue of the amendments proposed by the applicant to a separate conversation. So if that's okay, I might go through those and suggest that we move them just at this stage in my opening remark. But I just wanted to say a couple of things about a couple of matters which are likely to be certainly matters that the panel would want to consider. The first one obviously is the parking one, and the City of Fremantle and the council's policies have long been to not be overly concerned about providing individual parking for each site, rather looking forward to a more, I guess, citywide approach to the parking, and not ultimately having lots of cars entering into all the different nooks and crannies of a quite tight city centre. We obviously have a large car park directly opposite this site that a number of hotels utilise. And in fact, some of the other hotels in the city centre area, including the Esplanade Hotel, which is significantly bigger than this, rely on parking that is not directly associated with the site that they're sitting on, but is in fact located in a street that would be further away than the car park in this instance. I am, although I've said that, I am concerned that in the long term, the loss of public parking in these city areas, including this site and including in Henderson Street Mall, is starting to have an impact on the perception of accessibility into the city centre. But that is really a matter for the city and the council to resolve in terms of its parking strategy, rather than what the planning documents are suggesting for this particular application. So I'm comfortable with that. I think the applicants do have to understand that if they're relying on public realm for servicing of their building, which is exactly what they are relying on, that they may have to contribute to that over the course of the life of the development, because they are getting a considerable dispensation on parking in terms of the capacity to build the building on site. I also just wanted to just touch on the issue of the canopies that I referred to in my comments. I am concerned that the proposal is weak in that regard, in that one, the awning started off as being only, I think, 1.5 metres or 1.2 metres. They've increased them to 2 metres following officer comment to them. But even at 2 metres in the squally conditions of Fremantle, that typically doesn't cover or provide a lot of weather protection. You do need quite deep verandas or awnings in Fremantle. And I am concerned that it's not continuous. The policy actually, the LPP actually talks about weather protection. It also infers that obviously it should be continuous. Doesn't use that word exactly, but it does talk about verandas providing weather protection over the full width of the footpath. So I'm concerned, one, that it's not wide enough, and two, that it's not continuous. And I would like to do an amendment that actually deals with that. I apologise, I haven't submitted it prior to the meeting. So if I could go to that now.
You can move that amendment now. Do you have some wording that you may?
I have, and I've written it down. I can even pass it over to.
Just read it out, then we will
read it out. It follows similar wording in the document that talks about essentially design detail elements. So its wording is, prior to the lodgement of a building permit application for the development hereby approved, the final detail of the awnings to William Street and Henderson Street Mall, including providing continuous weather protection over a 2.4 metre deep section of the footpath in areas not serviced by the covered colonnade on site, and to the satisfaction of local planning policy 3.1.5, clause 5.1, to be submitted and approved to the satisfaction of the City of Fremantle on the advice of the city's Design Advisory Committee. So,
Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Thank you. Do you wish to speak further? Could I just check, Councillor Sullivan, given the questions raised about the inclusion of the words the Design Advisory Committee, are you happy to drop those off?
I'm happy if it's kind of, it probably doesn't need to go to the Design Advisory Committee. So let's.
Are you happy as seconder to drop those words, Councillor? Yes. Do you wish to speak further to that amendment?
Only that I am just genuinely concerned about weather protection. It's quite different to other areas of Perth. Fremantle is renowned for incredibly squally conditions and rain that essentially goes horizontal. We're trying to encourage the pedestrianisation of particularly this core part of the city, Henderson Street, the Cappuccino Strip, and William Street and High Street as a sort of an area of continuity. Essentially, there are very few gaps, and I know from experience that those gaps can be pretty horrendous in the Fremantle conditions. And given that it is in a local planning policy, it would seem to me that it does need to be respected. And I did make the comment to also that where the colonnades are, then obviously that's satisfactory. But I think you do need to be able to get to the colonnades from a protected veranda or awning. I'm not seeking, significant change to what they're proposing. Haven't sort of said it's got to be a significantly more robust awning. I think canvas awning is all that the proponent wants to provide. That will be satisfactory, and they'll probably have to renew it every 10 years, but that's not really a planning matter. And the last thing I would say, and just as a comment really, is that the design doesn't particularly tell you where the front doors are of this development, particularly getting into the hotel. You can get in from Henderson Street.
Does this relate to the awning amendment?
Well, I'm just saying it more to the applicants.
Let's deal with your amendment first, and then you can finish with that commentary if you like. Councillor Van Dawson, as seconder of the amendment, do you wish to speak?
Just briefly, I support the amendment. I think awnings are an important feature to improve the amenity of the realm, and it is consistent with the policy provision and existing developments in the area. I would like to see a continuation of that shelter provided as much as possible to protect people thinking about cities.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against the amendment?
I'm happy to support it. I suppose on the proviso that it doesn't destroy the design excellence of that frontage, which in itself the building does a great job in the way it interacts or provides that interaction with the street, and the awning is a soft transition to the street itself. So I wouldn't want the outcome to be a very heavy awning that destroys that building frontage.
Who do you wish to speak?
Well, I have a similar concern in that we don't want sort of massive 1927 awning sitting out in front of the building. I'm sure that can be resolved. But, if it can be a canvas or different type of structure, I'm happy, and I support the actual intent of it. I just think we just need to be a bit careful we don't end up with a big lump in front of the building.
Okay, look, I'll speak very briefly to it. I also share the concern about impact on design. I will support the amendment on the basis that it is still to the satisfaction of the city, and it is to the satisfaction of the city on advice from the, without mentioning it in the condition, the Design Advisory Committee. So if the Design Advisory Committee senses that introduction or continuation of an awning is going to be detrimental to that design, and there is the potential for weather protection with a softer structure or even potentially no structure, if the Design Advisory Committee strongly feels that it doesn't require that, then I'm happy. Obviously, then the discretion falls back on the city to say the design advice we've taken from the committee says don't go there with the awning. I'll support it on that basis. Yep. Back to you as mover of the amendment, Councillor.
Thank you. Before I close, I would be happy to add the word canvas in front of the word awnings.
You can if you would like with the
because that was the intent, was not to change the awnings, but to simply finalise the detail and extent. So
I wonder, I wonder if we should just leave that because it leaves it open to look at a range of solutions.
Lightweight.
Yep. Okay. Do you wish to close on the amendment?
No, other than to say that the reason I wrote it that way, the final detail of the awnings, was to try and to suggest that they are primarily acceptable, but the width and the continuity are the elements that need to be changed. I'm happy to include that in the reasons for amendment as well.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, let's put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Back to you on the substantive motion. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. That was my only real concern. I'm happy to look at the amendments that have been suggested by the applicant, but we'll presumably do those in due course.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dawson.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Second much of what Councillor Sullivan has said today, so thank you. Just agree the key matters to be considered here, in my view, were the parking and height, heritage and public realm. I think in terms of the parking, Councillor Sullivan has covered it, but agree while it's disappointing that there's no parking being provided, I think hotels do need parking. There is parking around the city, and I think allowing this discretion is consistent with other approvals for other hotel developments and short-term accommodation developments in the city. And I think it's, the other discretionary item is the height. I'm quite happy to grant that height discretion at 2 metres. I think it's consistent. It's addressed the discretionary criteria in the scheme. The development is consistent with the previous approval as well as development in the area. And I'm comfortable with the heritage elements. I think the design's done a great job to respond to the heritage in the area. It is an important factor. And overall, just I think it's been a great job with the design. So thank you to the design team. It is definitely an improvement to the previous scheme. So I really hope this one gets off the ground. And I guess that sort of leads into the public realm element. Yeah, really excited by the prospect of the improvement to this site and how it would improve the area and tie into our new strategic planning and plans for that around that site. And it'd be great to see it activated if this all comes off the ground. So yes, very happy to support this application and proposal, and I will leave the conditions. I trust I do support, I guess, on the conditions that have been proposed, the amendments. I support the proposed amendment to 4, 5, 17 and 24. I don't support deleting condition 18 and appreciate the clarification from Chloe today, the city's planning officer, on that. And I think that would be reasonable given thoughts on how the previous building, which was quite significant from a heritage perspective, how that would have been demolished and likely just covered. I understand there was basement elements. I would like to see some archaeological oversight so that if anything is found, it's identified, and I don't want it to be onerous or a great burden to the proponent, but I do support retaining.
Councillor, does anyone else wish to speak for or against the substantive?
Just to start off, with some of the planning stuff, I suppose the proposal development generally complies with the planning framework, being the local planning scheme number 4, with the exception of building height and parking, as we've heard. There is, in my view, a very sound argument to support the exercise of discretion in both cases. In the context of the location and some of the buildings adjacent to this site, the additional height can be supported. There are no real amenity impacts on the street or on the nearby heritage buildings in terms of the additional height. With regard to the parking, noting that this is a very large variation, I think that the arguments presented in the RA are very sound. Not bringing more cars into the centre of Fremantle is a bonus for the city. There are plenty of other transport options for nearby public parking. I note the support from the Heritage Council and that of the officers regarding the relationship of this proposal to the important heritage buildings. Also note the comments of the applicant regarding the need or not for all of the dilapidation reports requested. I think the suggestion to, I'd be happy to move an amendment to take out the 3 other ones or just include the wording of the Waters cottages. So in terms of condition 17, I'd like to move, take out the words 4 state registered heritage places and put in the Waters cottages.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded, Councillor Van Dawson. Back to you.
Look, I think the reason is that that's the one that's probably most likely to be affected, but importantly, it's a very different development to the one that was proposed before. When the proposed before did have a basement, this doesn't have a basement, and the likelihood of disturbance is far reduced for this situation. So I'm happy to support that amendment.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? Councillor Sullivan.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm not sure that the Waters cottages up into the sort of old police area necessarily need to be included, but I think definitely the ones directly opposite that are fronting Henderson Street Mall do need to be considered. But I am concerned also about the building immediately abutting, which is actually number 2 Henderson Street. I think the heritage advice may have got the information incorrect, because they talk about number 10 Henderson Street, but number 10 Henderson Street is actually part of this subject site. It's actually the corner lot of this subject site. Number 2 is the old Shanghai food hall markets, which may not, I'm not absolutely clear as to whether it's heritage listed, but it is immediately abutting this site, and it actually has a basement, and that is probably what makes it slightly more vulnerable to site works. So I would ask the mover if they would consider potentially decreasing the amount of Waters cottages to just those that are fronting Henderson Street, but including number 2 Henderson Street, which is the immediately abutting building that is of a sensitive heritage nature. So I'm happily support that, but if you could consider that, I'd be appreciative.
Happy to change my suggested amendment to Waters cottages fronting Henderson Street and the building at number 2 Henderson Street.
Happy to change as mover?
Yes, sorry.
Yep, seconder. Yes. Does any other member wish to speak for or against the amended amendment? No? All right, let's vote on that amendment and vote in favour.
Want to finish off by saying it's notable that while the applicant provided amended plans in response to the Design Advisory Committee, comments. There was no substantial design response, just noting that. So there are some conditions to address some of the matters that have been raised. In my view, this is a very good design, a great quality development proposed for this location in the city of Fremantle. The opportunity for an active frontage to the both Henderson and William Street, and the opening of the Spicer Laneway will provide an exceptional pedestrian experience. This is a far better design than the previous one approved, so it's got my whole support.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Yes, I'd like to speak for the proposal. I'm happy to support the recommendation for approval. I'm happy with the discretionary use for parking and height. I think the parking has been dealt with within the report, and there's ample parking in very close proximity. The height, I think, is still in accordance with most of the scheme, and I'm happy to support a small variation to that. I think it's a high quality development and will be a very good outcome for not only the city and the community, but for the location. So on that basis, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. All right. Before I talk to the substantive, I'll deal with some of those amendments that we've been talking about. The first of which to amend condition 4 to delete the words William Street, given the 2 dedicated hotel drop-off bays are shown within the upgraded Henderson Street Road Reserve and are an integral part of the application. Do I have a second for that amendment? Seconded, Clayton Hire. Nothing really more to say. I think it's clear from the plans that there is already the intent to provide the 2 bays in Henderson. The works to William, or the plans for William, are down the track, and the applicants will be engaged through that process, but I'm happy to remove the requirement for bays in William Street at this stage. Does any member wish to speak for or against that?
Just for clarity, so you're removing the word William Street?
Yes, so it then just refers to the road reserve.
Which was the suggestion of the officer, and you're maintaining the design and construction of the parking bay, so not including the second part of the request.
Yeah, just deleting the words William Street, because there is the intent to provide the 2 bays anyway on the
for clarity.
I was just going to suggest further amendment for further clarification to say within the road reserve adjoining the development site. Necessary, but
it's obvious.
Within the road reserve adjoining the development site, I'm happy to add those words as mover. As seconder, are you happy to add them? Right. Is there any other further discussion on that amendment? Let's vote on it. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I'd then like to amend condition 5 to delete the words on the advice of the city's design advisory committee. Do I have a second? Thank you. The reason is, if the city is satisfied with the schedule, it's not necessary to mandate involvement of the committee. They are likely to refer it to the committee anyway, given that is their standard practice, but it's not necessary to have that wording in the condition. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? No. Let's vote on it. All those in favour? Against? Carried 4-1. I'd like to then amend condition 13 to include the words details of before the words end of trip facilities, because the way the condition is currently worded, the facilities would need to be provided for the issue of the building permit, which isn't practical. Do I have a second for that amendment? Seconded, Councillor Van Dawson. Is simply a word missing from the condition. This just clarifies that it is only the details of facilities that need to be provided at this stage. Does any member wish to speak for or against that amendment? No. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I would like to then amend condition 19, add the following words. The approved interpretation plan shall be implemented prior to occupation to the satisfaction of the city. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded, Councillor Van Dawson. The reason, as per my question to the city staff earlier, there's currently no wording in those conditions about when that plan needs to be implemented. And if it doesn't have to be implemented prior, well, if it doesn't need to be implemented prior to a building permit, obviously it can't be. There's no time frame suggested, so this just gives a time frame for separate implementation of the plan. Does any member wish to speak for or against that amendment? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I'd like to amend condition 24, which relates to certification of the Green Star rating, to replace the words prior to occupation with the words within 24 months of practical completion. Do I have a seconder? I am. As per the applicant's request and their justification, a final Green Star certification can't be completed until after the development has been operational for 12 months. As such, the condition should be amended to allow for this period and some time to get the reporting completed. Does any other member wish to speak for or against that amendment? No. Let's vote on that amendment. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. I don't wish to move any further amendments. I would like to just talk briefly to why I'm not moving an amendment to condition 18. I think following on from the information provided by the staff today, yes, the previous basement has been filled some time ago, and yes, the likelihood of finding something is quite low, but the previous building was significant from a heritage point of view, and we don't know what fill was used to fill that basement. And although you're not doing another basement, there will be some excavations. So I get the sense from the city that they're not asking for a bells and whistles plan. This is simply a methodology that you are going to put forward for how you will deal with any artifacts or significant things that are found during your construction. So that is why I'm happy to condition 18 intact. Overall, I'm very happy to approve the development's very high quality proposal for a site that in my view has been crying out for development, and this was reflected in its inclusion as one of the 12 strategic sites that formed the basis of Amendment 49 to the city's planning scheme. I think looking at the two different designs, this design is an improvement on the one previously approved, both in terms of its scale and presentation to both William and Henderson streets. I note the objections received, which relate primarily to impact on other heritage sites, the height, bulk and scale in relation to surrounding development, the potential for interface issues with entertainment venues and the lack of on-site parking. But I think the city's RA has responded well to those submissions. In terms of heritage, the proposal is supported by both the Heritage Council and the city's heritage experts, and these experts are of the view that the development will not detract from the wider heritage setting, again noting that the current proposal is more respectful to the Waters cottages than the previous proposal. Whilst additional height is being proposed, which exceeds the specific provisions of the underlying planning framework, this same framework allows that these can be varied if the additional height is integrated well into the proposal and is of a height and scale appropriate for the context. And the city's RA goes into significant detail on pages 29 through 35, 6 pages on the matter of height, and I'm satisfied with their conclusions, specifically that we have the discretion to approve the additional height and that the additional height will have no undue impact on the surrounding area. In terms of suitability of use in the context of entertainment venues, I understand why this is a concern. Sometimes entertainment venues are impacted greatly by development that moves in. We've had that in other places in the metropolitan area, and then complaints are lodged about those entertainment venues. But I think that has been appropriately addressed through the conditions that require a standard of construction that will mitigate any noise impacts to the hotel residents. In terms of parking, I understand why concerns were raised, given there's no parking provided on sites. But again, the city's RA has clearly set out why this is supportable, particularly given the inner city location of this site and its proximity to numerous public parks. So I think all in all, this development will be transformational for this part of Fremantle, and I'm very happy to support With that, I will hand back to the mover to close if you wish.
Thank you. I will close just by noting that I did have some sympathy for maybe changing condition 18, but I didn't move it because I felt there was already some discussion about that and not support for doing that. I did want to say though that while I support archaeological processes, they do need to be done in a way that is recognising of the extent to which we might learn something new from doing it, rather than it being an extensive academic approach to archaeology. So we know what the site had there previously. We know what the buildings look like mostly. And if there is any surprises, then I think that's where archaeology should come in. It shouldn't be used as a way of producing endless supply of documents that go into the history section that really don't tell us anything new. The other thing I just wanted to say briefly too, because it's not something that we could really condition in planning, was the fact that there is a requirement or an element about noise in the approval. But importantly, from experience from other hotel operators in the area, and I refer specifically to the new hotel at the police station site, is that we can't really do enough in the planning approval process to ensure that the developer does the right thing in building a new building in that environment. And the hotel operator of that building found that even though they felt they had a fully compliant building from a noise mitigation perspective, when they went through and tested every element of that building towards the end of construction, they realised just how leaky it was, and that creates problems. So an applicant coming into the city that wants to be part of the vibrancy, that wants their hotel guests to enjoy the vibrancy of the city, also have quiet enjoyment of their bedrooms, does need to go above and beyond what we can really put into a planning approval. And I just wanted to emphasise that publicly, because at this point in time, we can't do more than what we've indicated in the approval. Thank you.
Councillor. With that, we will now put the substantive motion as amended to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 4, Form 2 DAP applications. We have nil today, and we do not have any Section 31 SAT reconsideration. Finishing off with Part E of the agenda, SAT applications and Supreme Court appeals. All SAT applications for the DAPs are listed on our website, none of which relate to any of the local governments we have dealt with today. With that, I close the meeting at 12:08 p.m. and I thank everyone for your attendance. Thanks again, Chloe. Thank you to the councillors for being part of this and for making your deputations. And thank you to our secretariat for their great work.
Thank you.